Darren Till and Luke Rockhold will be squaring off in a boxing match later today at Misfits Boxing 22. There's been some drama between the two at the weigh-ins, as well as some alleged drama behind the scenes between Luke Rockhold and Dillon Danis. And all of this really begs the question of why a 40-year-old like Luke Rockhold is boxing a 32-year-old like Darren Till in the first place. We'll talk about this event, this fight, the drama between Rockhold and the other combat athletes, this via bloodyelbow.com. Thank you for watching My Fitness Fight, the channel where we touch gloves and come out fighting. Please like the video, subscribe to the channel, and remember to follow Big John's advice, protect yourself at all times. Alright, so we've got this Misfits Boxing 22 event, which has Darren Till and Luke Rockhold headlining, and I gotta be honest, I just don't understand why Luke Rockhold is doing this. This particular article is about the fact that they apparently agreed to add an additional 2 rounds to the fight. I think it was previously going to be 4 rounds or 6 rounds, and then they added another 2 rounds. And this just seems to further demonstrate that maybe Luke Rockhold isn't thinking too clearly about the decisions he's making here. And according to Yahoo Sports, the current betting line for this fight is minus 2,000 for Darren Till and plus 1,000 for Luke Rockhold. In other words, the bookmakers are giving almost no chance that Luke Rockhold wins. And I gotta be honest, I agree. And that's despite the fact that I'm a huge Luke Rockhold fan. He was an absolute badass. Back in the day, he had a really exciting and unique fighting style and extremely high-level skills. But he's currently 40 years old, and he lost 2 of his last 3 MMA fights by knockout. Since then, he had a loss in BKFC and a win in Karate Combat. But the win in Karate Combat was against Joe Schilling, who is actually a year older than him. And I'm not saying that these guys aren't still good fighters. I'm sure they could both kick my ass easily. But the fact is, at age 40, 41, you just don't have the same reflexes and explosive capacity that you had when you were in your early 30s. And Darren Till is in his early 30s. He's 32. And Till also lost his last 3 MMA fights, but none of them were by knockout. He's currently 32 years old, which makes him 8 years younger than Rockhold. And since his last MMA fight, he's actually made a pretty successful transition into boxing. Now, these fights are listed as exhibitions, but they're on the DAZN, or whatever you call it, network. So I would imagine that means he's competing at a reasonably high level. They're probably making pretty good money. And his last MMA fight was a loss in the UFC to Dricus du Plessis in 2022. Since then, he's won 3 boxing bouts, 1 in 2024 and 2 this year in 2025. And he's had about 3 months off since his last fight. So he's going to be coming into this with a full head of steam. And the thing is, even if you stay in really good shape as you get older, and maybe you even improve your fitness in certain ways, like you can squat more, or you can deadlift more, or you have better cardiovascular endurance or something. First of all, that would be rare. It's rare for someone who was an athlete in their early 30s to be a better athlete in their early 40s. Not necessarily impossible, but rare. But what is impossible is to have the same snap and the same reflexes and the same ability to absorb and recover from damage in your 40s as you did in your 30s. I'm 37, and I can tell you, I already don't have the same resilience that I had in my early 30s. And when I used to do MMA, I trained with guys all the way from older teenagers and young adults up to guys who were in their 40s. And the guys in their 40s, they don't move the same way. They can still be really skilled fighters, they can be really strong, they can have good endurance, but they're not going to have the same explosiveness, the same reflexes, same ability to like turn the corner and get around your defenses. And in boxing, movement is so key, and speed and reflexes are incredibly important. So I would have to say that the likelihood of Luke Rockhold winning this fight is extremely low, and evidently the odds makers agree with me. And unfortunately, I would say that the likelihood of Luke Rockhold getting knocked out badly is dangerously high, because he's been knocked out badly before. He's kind of known as having a glass jaw, and that's not going to get better with age. That literally can't get better with age. So I gotta be honest, I kind of wish this bout and bouts like this weren't happening. I wish that the whole keeping combat athletes who don't want to give the sport up on the circuit into their 40s, I wish that wasn't a thing. I would really prefer to see organizations like this create shows similar to The Ultimate Fighter or things like that. You know, like hire Luke Rockhold and Joe Schilling and Darren Till to coach up-and-coming young fighters and make a show about that. You know, I would love to watch that. I don't really have any interest in watching this. And it's too bad because as far as I can tell, DAZN or whatever they're called is one of the main sports streaming apps that actually streams MMA and boxing. And so if their content was something that I was interested in consuming, then I would definitely want to support that. But I just have no interest in watching 40-year-old men get knocked out by guys who are almost a decade younger than them. And when you look at the betting odds, it's obvious that I'm not the only person that thinks Luke Rockhold is almost certainly going to get beaten badly. And it's unfortunate that a lot of guys like Luke Rockhold feel committed to the sport. They feel like fighting is all that they have. And I could be putting words in his mouth. Maybe he doesn't feel this way. Maybe he's fighting for some other reason. But in most cases, and I'm sure this is the case with Rockhold, there's other ways that he could make money, right? He's a very highly skilled and decorated mixed martial artist. He's very well known within our niche. And so there's many, many different ways that he could earn a living, which means that there must be something else that is keeping him coming out here, taking fights that he has little to no chance of winning. And we've seen this with other fighters who keep going way past their prime. Anderson Silva did that. And I think it used to be a little bit more common when the sport was less popular and there was not as much talent in it. And that's because in MMA, in the heavier weight classes, back when there was only like maybe 20, 30, 40 guys in a weight class, the most skilled fighters were capable of staying at the top of the heap into their late 30s and 40s. But that's really just not the case anymore. There's just too much talent and too much new young talent coming in all the time. And at this point, these are guys who have been training their entire life, right? Like Khamzat Chimaev, it's not an accident that he's a really good wrestler. He's been wrestling like since he learned how to walk. And when you've got guys like him that are in their late 20s or their early 30s who have been training their entire lives, as a guy in your 40s, you're not going to be able to stay competitive with them no matter how good you are, because a big part of these sports does rely on your explosiveness and your ability to absorb damage. And those are things that you just can't get better at as you get older. So I guess I wanted to cover this because I kind of wish it wasn't happening, but I understand why there's a market for it, and where there's a market for it, someone's going to provide the service. It's just unfortunate because it seems like maybe the organizations such as Misfits that are offering these contracts to guys like Rockhold could offer them something else instead. And I don't know if that would work. Like I said, I think with most guys that are Rockhold's age that are still fighting professionally, these days, especially when you're as well known and as successful as he is, it can't just be about the money. It's got to be partially about some attachment to the sport. And while I can definitely understand that, I don't think it's healthy, and it's not what I want to watch for entertainment. So all I can really hope for with this fight is that neither of them gets too badly hurt, and that maybe Luke Rockhold decides to move on to something other than prize fighting for a living. Thank you once more for watching my fitness fight. Remember to leave a like, subscribe to the channel, and share this video with a friend so that they can remind you to come back and watch the next one.